J.K. Rowling pushes back against the woke left, and then she gets cancelled by the woke left. The Trudeau government admits they're looking into raising the carbon tax just 2 months after an election campaign where they pledged not to do so. And it's Christmas time, so we're going to talk about the most underreported story in the world, the religious persecution of Christians. I'm Candice Malcolm, and this is the Candice Malcolm Show. Hi everyone, Merry Christmas. We're really looking forward to Christmas Day tomorrow. And before we get into that though, there's a couple of news stories that I really wanted to talk about. First things first, J.K. Rowling tweeted out the following and caused a huge stir online. She said, "Dress however you please, call yourself whatever you like, sleep with any consenting adult who'll have you, live your best life in peace and security, but force women out of their job for stating that sex is real, ? Hashtag I stand with Maya, hashtag this is not a drill." So the famous author of the Harry Potter series, who herself is a leftist, who herself has constantly been promoting mass migration, open borders, against Brexit, you name it, she's on top of the social justice issues. But on this issue, I was actually really surprised to see J.K. Rowling take the opposite perspective and sort of turn a little bit on the sort of woke left here. And so what this story is about is a woman named Maya Forstater. Maya was fired from her job for basically pushing back against the woke culture and standing up for traditional feminist rights. Now, because of that, she gets called the sort of defamatory term TERF, which stands for Trans Exclusionary Radical Feminist. It's sort of a slur that trans people throw towards feminists who are not completely in line with their sort of latest iteration of LGBTQ rights. And what this story is all about, though, it's not about gender identity. It's not about people who wish to say that they identify as a woman even though they were born biologically as a man. This is about biological sex. And so it's not just gender that we're debating about anymore. It's the biological aspects of sex. And so Maya, she calls herself a feminist test case. "I lost my job over tweeting and writing about sex and gender identity and sharing campaign material about the negative impacts of the proposed policy of gender self-ID on women and girls. I'm now taking the organization I worked for to the Employment Tribunal for discriminating against me and my beliefs." So the ruling came out on Friday, and it came out originally against Maya. And it was really a crazy case. To most people watching, this is just way over the top. It's pretty common sense that, sure, you can identify as a different gender if you want, but you can't change your biological sex. That's still rooted in biology. Well, not according to this UK judge who's just set a precedent that you can be fired for stating that. And you even have someone who's on the left and of the left, J.K. Rowling, saying, whoa, look, guys, you've gone too far. And because of that, she basically got mobbed. Now, you can see from J.K. Rowling's tweet, she has quite a bit of support. Her tweet gained 190,000 likes. But, I mean, you just sort of start scrolling through the replies here, and you really see how deranged the woke left is when it comes to someone pushing back against some of the more absurd arguments that they're making. So really, in some ways this is a good sign because it shows that even people like J.K. Rowling, who's a very high-profile mainstream leftist, is, kind of had enough of the whole shtick of forcing and coercing people to say things that are not true, that are not rooted in science and biology. But then on the other hand, looking at some of the replies here, wow. Pretty mad, pretty crazy times. Okay, let's move on. So this is a story exclusive over at tnc.news. My colleague Andrew Lawton wrote about this. So the Trudeau government, Trudeau's new environment minister, was over in Madrid at the climate conference over there, and basically said the opposite of what the Trudeau government has been saying all along, which is basically saying that the Trudeau government is now looking into raising carbon taxes on Canadians. And not just that, but also canceling some of the rebates that Canadians are supposed to be getting from that carbon tax. So here's the story. Justin Trudeau's government is slashing carbon tax rebates in provinces pushing back against the federal carbon tax. The new environmental minister is also not ruling out an increase to the carbon tax just 2 months after the federal election. Justin Trudeau's mandate letter to Minister Jonathan Wilkinson says the new minister should be strengthening existing and introducing new greenhouse gas reduction measures, citing Canada's 2030 Paris Accord targets and the 2050 goal of net zero emissions. So I'm old enough to remember, 3 months ago when the Conservatives were accusing the Trudeau Liberals of hiding the fact that they were going to be increasing the carbon tax, saying that it's inevitable that they would have to raise the carbon tax just to meet their own targets. And the mainstream media pushing back and basically saying the Conservatives are lying, the Conservatives are being disingenuous. Here's a report from Global at the time saying new Conservative Party ad accused of deceiving Canadians over the carbon tax. Oh, well, it turns out that it was the Liberals and the Trudeau government that were deceiving Canadians and not the Conservatives, as the media claimed. Well, that's what you can expect from the mainstream media. Completely dishonest. Here's another exclusive over at tnc.news. A Canadian grain retailer was charged over $10,000 in federal carbon taxes. Over $10,000. So we received this bill. We verified its authenticity. Basically, here it is. They were charged $10,267.71 on an energy bill that was $46,382, which is about 20%. This is the cost that businesses are bearing, and you better believe that those costs are going to be passed on to the consumers, making everything more expensive. Just like so many Conservatives, so many people like myself warned about that a carbon tax is a tax on everything, because so many things within the economy get taxed, get passed along. So whether it's something like this, this business focuses on grain and drying grain, which is an energy intensive process. It's not just things like this. It's also anything that gets shipped, anything that's getting transported across the country. You think of manufacturers or anything that has to keep a facility heated and lit. Really, it's hard to over-exaggerate how much the carbon tax impacts every aspect of the economy. So sure, there are rebates, as I just mentioned, though. The Trudeau government is looking to reduce those rebates. And it's not like they're doing it to balance the budget. No, as we reported last week, the budget deficit is spiraling out of control, and there is no end in sight to the borrowing from the Trudeau government. Okay, so like I said, it is Christmas time. Every year at Christmas, I write my Toronto Sun column about what I think is the most underreported story in the world, which is the persecution of Christians worldwide. Many people think of Christians as being, the people who live in Europe and North America who are affluent and prosperous and free, and they don't think about Christian suffering. But the world reports every single year come out and say the same thing, that Christians are the most persecuted group on the planet. You have to go to other continents to see it, although, even in places like Europe, Christians are targeted. There's been attacks by Islamist terrorists against Christmas markets, against churches. Surely, across North America, there is discrimination against Christians as sort of the tides are turning and people are becoming more and more anti-Christian. But then there is also very, very real and intense persecution around the world. Back in 2017 on Palm Sunday, Islamic State militants waged a callous attack against Coptic Christians praying at their church in Egypt. 2 suicide bombers struck, killing 44 people in one of the deadliest blasts. These kind of attacks are commonplace. It's incredibly sad. Just a couple of weeks ago, in Burkina Faso, which is a small African nation bordering Mali, there was another attack on a church on Sunday, December 1st. Assailants attacked a small church near the border of Niger and Mali. The gunmen opened fire, killing the pastor, as well as 13 congregants, which included 5 children. So like I said, these attacks happen with some frequency. They also happen in Pakistan. I've written extensively about an attack on a Christian woman, a villager named Asia Bibi, and Bibi was accused of drinking water from a cup that belonged to a Muslim person. She was confronted by a mob who angrily demanded that she convert to Islam or be killed. Bibi refused, and because of that, she was arrested and given a death sentence in prison for blasphemy, for insulting Islam. Well, fortunately for Bibi, she was acquitted from the high court in Pakistan, and she was sent to Canada as a refugee. So she is now living safely in Canada after a lot of pressure and a lot of outcry. But, Bibi is still not safe. As True North reported, shortly after she arrived in Canada, a Islamist from Pakistan posted a video on social media claiming that he was in Canada and he was there to kill Bibi. But again, it's really, really worth noting and contemplating that Christians are under siege and under attack around the world. One of the examples I like to point to is in the Middle East, the sort of biblical homeland of Christians, a historic home. So after the end of the First World War, it is estimated that about 1 in 5 people in the Middle East region population was a Christian. Okay, so that was 100 years ago. We had about 20% of the population being Christian, with large, vibrant Christian communities in countries like Syria, Iraq, Egypt, Jordan, Iran, Turkey, you name it. There were a lot of Christians, and the society used to be much more pluralistic, much more tolerant, much more accepting of diverse ways. Well, that's just not the case anymore. There's been a rise of a very violent extremist strain of Islam that's governing many of those countries, and because of it, the Christian population today in the Middle East is now estimated to be less than 4%. So it went from 1 in 5 100 years ago to less than 4% today. And in some of those countries I mentioned, like both Iran and Turkey, the population of Muslims now surpasses 99%. So, basically there's no Christians and no Jews and no non-Muslims left in those countries, which is incredibly sad. Christians have been the victim of ethnic cleansing, of targeting killings, and of genocide in that part of the world. That's something that you just very rarely hear about. No one talks about it, no one discusses it, but Christians are under siege and under attack around the world. So this year at Christmas, while we're enjoying the festive time of year, enjoying time with our friends and our family and our loved ones, we should also commit to doing better, to stand up for Christians around the world. There's so many different ways that we can do that. In Canada, you can donate funds to Christian groups that help give aid to other Christians around the world. You can pressure the government, pressure our politicians to stand up and raise these important issues on the global stage. Or also there's opportunities to bring Christians to Canada. There's a private refugee program that allows private groups like churches and charities to come together and privately sponsor people into the country. You should consider looking into that with your church or with a group of friends to help save Christians that are being persecuted around the world. All right, everyone, Merry Christmas. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we will see you later this week. Thank you so much.